When we can no longer change a situation, we're challenged to change ourselves. Everything can be taken from a human but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's way. Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. Emotional control is a simple concept that is, nevertheless, not easy. It's the ability to choose our response to a situation rather than allowing that situation to determine the choice you make. You may recognize that this is essentially what the ACT technique described above teaches you. At the end of the day, we have a human freedom to respond as we choose. Even if we are emotionally overwhelmed, even if the situation we are in is unfair, unpleasant, painful, scary, or confusing. Emotional control doesn't mean we become emotionless or that we don't care about anything. It means we have all the emotions we ordinarily would, but they occupy a different place in our world. When we have emotional control, it's as though our fleeting experiences are passengers in a car we are driving, rather than being the driver of that car themselves. Elsewhere, Frankl has said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. But often in life, we have zero control over what our circumstances are, or over our knee-jerk reactions and responses to those. For example, someone stands on our toe and we immediately cry out in pain. We're told bad news and are instantly in shock and disbelief. None of this is under our control, including the emotion of anger, pain, or fear. So, perhaps the term emotional control is misleading, because in fact, we don't need to control anything. The gap or space that Frankl is talking about can also be understood as the short period of time in which we feel an automatic emotional response to something before it's over. After that, everything is under our control again. In other words, it's what we choose to do next that makes all the difference. Neuroscientist and author of My Stroke of Insight, Jill Bolt Taylor, explains what she thinks of as a 90-second rule. When a person has a reaction to something in their environment, there's a 90-second chemical process that happens. Any remaining emotional response is just the person choosing to stay in that emotional loop. Essentially, when you look at cells in the circuitry of the brain, every reactivity is simply a group of cells performing their function. From the moment you have the thought that there's a threat and that circuit of fear gets triggered, it will stimulate the emotional circuitry related to it, which is the fight-or-flight reaction. That will trigger a physiological dumpage of usually norepinephrine, or anger, into the bloodstream. It will flush through you and flush out of you in less than 90 seconds. So from the moment you think the thought that triggers that whole cascade of events to the chemical flushing out of you takes less than 90 seconds. Look at the second hand on a watch. As soon as you look at it, you're now observing yourself having this physiological response instead of engaging with it. It will take less than 90 seconds, and you will feel better. Of course, you can always go back to thinking those thoughts that re-stimulate the loop. There's probably a thought somewhere in your brain of somebody who did you wrong 20 years ago. Every time you think of that person, it still starts that circuit. When things are getting hot and you're getting hot-headed, look at your watch. It takes 90 seconds to dissipate that anger response. Knowing that these kinds of experiences are short-lived makes it easier to accept them, diffuse from them, and remind yourself of what really matters, your values and goals, as described by ACT. It's a little like realizing that even the strongest and most unpleasant experience will only max out at around 90 seconds. Doesn't it make sense to ensure that it only lasts 90 seconds and that you don't necessarily drag it out for longer than that? After 90 seconds, the initial chemical reaction is over. If you still feel fear, anger, anxiety, or any other emotion, it's not your physiology that's fueling it. It's your own thoughts re-stimulating the chemical changes. It's your choice to keep refreshing that 90 seconds again and again. These thoughts construct a feedback loop that reactivate the chemical response and embed the emotion deeper. The irony is that our uniquely human ability to think makes it possible for us to get stuck in the emotional loop. So you feel anger that you have to do more work than you first thought. This anger lasts just 90 seconds. But then you find yourself getting angry about the anger. Then you're feeling guilty about that secondary anger. Then you're finding additional things to be mad about, and before you know it, you're caught in an awful reinforcing loop. Only the first 90 seconds of it were unavoidable, and the rest was purely optional. 4 strategies to work with the 90-second window. When we have control over our emotions, we're less likely to be swayed by impulse, allowing us to stay focused on our long-term goals and commitments. We give ourselves the power to make conscious decisions for more intentional living. The awareness of being able to recognize triggers, develop self-awareness, and regulate emotional responses helps you embrace personal responsibility and self-discipline. One obvious benefit of mastering this kind of self-control: we just enjoy our lives more and deliberately opt to not make things harder than they need to be. Just knowing about the 90-second rule gives you an advantage. Promise yourself that you will not make any decisions inside this period. Just ride things out, and then take action afterward, when you'll likely feel clearer. Acting when you're in the full flush of emotion may mean you create bigger problems for yourself. Just pause, notice, detach, and you'll be amazed at how quickly the wave comes and goes again. 1. Get to know your red flags. To cultivate self-discipline, it is essential to familiarize yourself with your own red flags. Take the time to explore and identify these specific triggers that activate negative emotional responses within you, even before the 90-second window begins. For example, when you put off something, it is maybe because you love to procrastinate, or you just love being in your comfort zone. It could also be because you lack structure, or find everything uninspiring. Reflect on the individuals, situations, timings, environments, or even specific stimuli, like music, that tend to provoke these reactions. By gaining a deeper understanding of your triggers, you can start taking ownership of them. Example, you're in a study session, when suddenly you encounter a difficult passage in a textbook. Within a matter of seconds, you're caught in a familiar old loop. You feel stupid and inadequate because you don't immediately understand what you're reading, and then this feeling makes you want to escape. You recognize that this is a trigger, and it usually has you immediately getting up off your seat and rummaging in the kitchen for a soothing snack to make you feel better. Knowing that the thought, "I'm stupid," and the feeling of confusion is a trigger for you, you can consciously choose to write it out for 90 seconds rather than allow it to send you to the kitchen. Perhaps you do a quick grounding exercise, run through an affirmation. It's okay not to understand things the first time around. I'm learning. I'm improving. And then, after a minute or two, that feeling isn't so pronounced anymore. You push on. Congratulations. You avoided an hours-long procrastination loop. 2. Identify an emotional reaction. In the realm of self-discipline, it is crucial to understand that every emotion manifests in a distinct physiological signature as various bodily systems are activated, including the cardiovascular, skeletal-muscular, neuroendocrine, and autonomic nervous systems. Take intentional pauses to observe and recognize these bodily reactions when experiencing different emotions. For instance, anger may be accompanied by a clenched jaw, tense muscles, and an increased or rapid heartbeat, while happiness often brings about a sense of inner lightness, relaxed muscles, and regular breathing patterns. To enhance self-discipline, regularly tune into your body and cultivate body awareness. When you find yourself overwhelmed by an emotion, take a moment to inquire, what do I feel in my body? Or, what am I noticing physically? Approach these questions with a sense of curiosity, exploring the physical sensations associated with your emotional state. Example: you're in your study session and start to notice your interest and attention flagging. You suddenly start feeling really uninspired by the content. You pause and do a body scan. You noticed sore eyes, a heavy feeling all over, tension in the forehead, tight shoulders. You realize that you're not losing interest in the work or being lazy. You're just tired. You take a break and return refreshed. 3. Label the emotion. Developing an extensive emotional vocabulary can greatly support your journey. The ability to name and identify specific emotions provides a powerful tool for understanding and managing them effectively. As in the last point, there's great value in knowing the difference between tired and unmotivated, because the solution to each problem will be very different. Often, people will self-castigate by diagnosing every negative feeling in themselves the same way. They may uniformly consider themselves lazy or stupid or unmotivated, when in reality, they are experiencing a range of complex emotional responses, some of them completely valid and appropriate. Instead of relying on broad descriptions like, "I'm being lazy," expand your emotional vocabulary to include more nuanced distinctions and a deeper understanding of your inner experiences. Incidentally, mislabeling is often just judgment in disguise, so being more accurate and neutral with labeling your feelings tends to make self-compassion easier. Example: at work, you notice yourself responding negatively to a task. You assume that not wanting to do the task means you feel unmotivated or bored by it. But when you really pay attention, you discover that this is actually just an assumption you've made. Exploring your feelings without any judgment reveals that you are actually feeling overwhelmed. It's not that the task is boring, it's that you have no idea where to begin with it and feel exhausted and burnt out just thinking about it. Many people mislabel excitement as fear or disinterest with anger. When you remove any ideas about what you feel you should be experiencing, you may be surprised at what you are actually experiencing. 4. Acceptance. Maintaining emotional control does not imply repression of our feelings. Our emotions play a crucial role in healthy adaptation and contribute to an emotionally fulfilling life. Therefore, it's important to allow feelings to naturally arise and subside without judgment or attempts to alter them. Instead, adopt a mindset of curiosity and become an observer of your emotions. Take charge and exercise control when you recognize that certain emotions should not overpower you. Example: you are embarking on a new training course and finding it extremely difficult to get through the assignments, somehow always procrastinating. You, and everyone around you, may be telling you a story that goes, "The course is difficult, but very much worth it. You have to push through, so be dedicated. We know you can do it." But this may be hiding your real emotions. You may be unable to do the course because it doesn't actually align with your values, and every time you sit down to work on it, you're reminded of something you're trying to avoid: the fact that you are long overdue a career change. This is an inconvenient side of procrastination that often goes unacknowledged. Sometimes you can't do something because, on some level, you know it's not what you want to be doing. Acceptance is the only way to know what you're working with, and the only thing that will tell you whether you do in fact need to push through or completely reconsider your career path. This has been How to Do Things You Hate: Self-Discipline to Suffer Less, Embrace the Suck, and Achieve Anything, written by Peter Hollins Narrated by Russell Newton. Copyright 2023 by Peter Hollins. Production copyright by Peter Hollins.